everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harmon. I'm Jeff's assistant, Ella. So nice to see you all. So this evening, Jeff is going to look at current events using the astrology, and then we're going to answer a couple of your questions. So, Jeff, I know you've got a lot to touch on. It's crazy as usual, the world. So what have you got to tell us?
Well, a lot. I mean, everybody knows. I mean, the airwaves are just packed right now with this whole Twitter situation with, all the dumps that Elon Musk has done. And, clearly we're looking at, he's going after Fauci. He's exposing all this stuff with the government and everything else. Well, isn't this interesting? Is exactly what I've been saying with the astrology. It's Neptune square Mars. And, if we went back, back in the 1800s and we were to look at some of the stuff that I've heard that was going on, obviously none of us were there, but if you look at some of the news on Wikipedia, it was a really dissensional and crazy time when Lincoln was in office and right before the Civil War and all the things that were going on, which is not in some ways an analogy, unlike what we're seeing now. I mean, we're seeing unprecedented things where, now we know for sure, Elon and Toto have both pulled the curtain back and we can really see who's behind there operating all the controls. It's clearly, the owners at the top of the pyramid funding, the quote unquote deep state or the people that are behind everything. And, it's an entire, like Eisenhower said, it's the industrial military complex that has really been, kind of operating things. And I think goes much, much deeper than that. But one of the things that I think this parallels in the astrology is the Sadi Sate of the United States. And again, people might say, well, what the heck is that? That's the Saturn transiting the moon of the United States. This only happens about 28 and a half year cycles. And we've been in it for the last 2 years. And of course, that's all I've been talking about is the fascism that's been coming in with the Saturn-Pluto cycle that really happened right when COVID happened. Secondly, we had a 240-year renewal cycle of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which is ushering in a high-tech era unlike we've never seen. But that's a double-edged sword. So where all is going on with Elon Musk and dumping all this stuff, as I think he's just pulling the curtain back. So we're seeing, true validation. I mean, everyone suspects that, they've been urinating down our back and telling us it's raining. But now there's no doubt that they were, right? So we actually have proof that they were. So it's very interesting stuff. And, I said on a previous podcast that, we're going to see Elon Musk's name. And this was before we even knew the Twitter was going to be bought. Remember that? That was probably
it was.
like right when we first started, like a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
We've only been doing this, a couple of months now? Something
just
like
about
that.
2 months. Yep.
Yeah, just about 2 months. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was right on the edge of whether we didn't know whether he's going to go through and buy Twitter. And of course, he did buy Twitter, and look at where it's all at. So what's really fascinating is the question I have is, okay, if we know this is going on with Twitter, what's been going on with all the other platforms? And, we know
right.
Lots of stuff.
Lots has been going on. It's lots that we'll never even know about, I'm sure.
That's exactly right. Yeah. If Fauci, it's interesting. You and I were talking about Fauci right before the podcast, and, he's getting a lot of heat right now because a lot's been uncovered. And of course, he keeps doing the duck, bob, and the weave, and he keeps escaping out of, the jaws of any kind of prosecution. He's like that wabbit. He just keeps popping out of goes to grab him, he pops out and he ends up over there. Right.
Yeah,
so it's really interesting because we looked at Anthony Fauci's chart and we found that his family came from a pharmacy in New York, which I thought was pretty cool.
Super, super interesting. His mom, I looked up his background because you saw that the moon was it squaring Mars?
No, it's conjuncting Mars. So right off the bat, I said, his mom couldn't have had an easy life.
Right, because the moon represents the mom. So then I thought, well, let me just look up a little bit of, see what I can find on his mom. His mom was born in 1909, passed in 1965. So
which means she was 56. Yeah.
56, so young. And she was born in Manhattan, Little Italy. And worked at the Fauci family pharmacy. First time I'd heard of the Fauci family pharmacy. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, those guys were pushing pills way back. So he came from the whole the legalized drug trade, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Yep. Yes.
So there you go. Well, I can tell you, we've had a couple of people ask, is anything going to let up with all this insanity that's been going on? Now we're hearing people say, well, we've got to reinstate masks, right? And they're pushing and pushing and pushing on the vaccine. So, I don't think they're going to get too far with this mask mandate. I know they're pushing it here in California, but my take is I don't think it's going to really come in. I think their weapon of choice is pandemics, but I think right now I'm not seeing that happen. I see more on the forefront, a lot of turmoil and trouble in government. And, this Hunter Biden story, I mean, of course, that's been all over the news, but I wouldn't be surprised, like I've been saying, if something comes down that's extraordinary in January. Now, what might that be? Well, for years we've been hearing, all these stories about, there's going to be, all the patriots are going to come riding into Washington. I don't believe that. I never have. I think there is a possibility, though, based on the United States chart and some of the progressions that we talked about, we could see something extraordinary with the Supreme Court. There's a lot of stuff between the Supreme Court right now, or in front of them, I hear, that's ready to go. And there's a lot of quote unquote theories out there right now that some pretty big stuff may be in the wind. I really do not expect much out of the Department of Injustice or the Federal Bureau of, Insanity. I don't think anything's going to come out of that that's substantial. Nobody's going to shoot themselves in the foot. You're not going to get the prosecutors to prosecute themselves. It's not going to happen. Yeah. But I think some of this stuff that's being uncovered, and I don't want to say too much. I don't want to get our channel canceled. Again, we got to get on the Rumble channel here soon. Then we can talk a little more freely. But I personally think we're about to see something quite unprecedented unravel in January. Again, the United States has Saturn in the sidereal zodiac clocking over the moon of the United States. That's huge. That only happens once every approximately 2 3/4 decades, almost 3 decades. So this is a big jump. The last time this happened was almost, 28 and a half, 29 years ago. It's a big deal. And the Nadi astrology is actually rounded to 30. So this is a big, big deal that's coming up here. And I think we're going to see stuff off the charts, because you have to add that to the astrology that we have a Neptune square Mars and an opposition Neptune. Plain English and all this, blowing smoke up your rear end. I mean, there's no other way to say it. And I mean, that's clearly what's going on here.
But at the same time, we are starting the 12 years of Jupiter in January as well, right?
You are exactly right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because see, that's the interesting thing about astrology is there's never just one thing going on. There's always a multitude of things that are giving what we call a confluence of energies. That's why you can never get the same thing twice. And, you've got all this backdrop with the world changing, all this push for the climate change and all this push against energy, the inflation. We've got the subterfuge going on, and a lot of people really ticked off right now. I mean, they're outright pissed off right now about all the things that have been happening. And I think this Twitter dump, or these multiple Twitter dumps, are having a huge effect on that. And I really think the astrology shows, and like you just mentioned, that 12-year progression of Jupiter, and that's using Nadi astrology for clarification. And what you do is you take Jupiter from its place in the United States birth chart and you progress it 12 years per sign based on the degrees that it was in. It's a little bit of a computation because the United States is 246 years old. But if my math is right, it's going to happen right around January 4th of this year. That progression should start. And that's pretty close to when I think we're going to begin to see some fireworks. Now, we've also got the Pluto return really coming on strong here in the sidereal zodiac over the next year and a half. And we complete the Neptune square Mars in March. So this is huge. It's really, really huge stuff. the United States has never had these energies in this confluence before. So, and there's more than that. I mean, I don't want to sit here and rattle off every detail, but I can just summarize it and say this is a major time of unprecedented change. I think we're going to see things we've never ever seen. I don't want to jump the gun, but I think we're going to see things we've never seen before starting next year. That's what I think. And I think the Supreme Court may be behind it. It's the only linchpin left.
Right. Yeah. Things we've never seen before. That's something to look forward to, I guess.
Yeah, you bet.
I guess. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, I think on a scale that is unprecedented. When you look at the Civil War was something that was extraordinary.
Oh.
Kennedy getting assassinated was extraordinary.
Well, when you say things we've never seen before, I hope it's not going to be things like that, because we don't want to see things like that.
No, we don't. But I'll tell you, the Civil War, I don't think we'll ever see anything repeat itself exactly. But remember, the Civil War broke out right after the Neptune Square Mars series in 1861. It was right after that. And there was, again, if I poked around a little bit in some of the news, and of course, we only know what has been printed on Wikipedia and other sources. And I actually had a great interest in the Civil War back in the 80s. I have a lot of books on it, and I read it and heard all these different theories from various different generals. And I was always struck by why would General Lee have dug himself in on low ground in Gettysburg and literally be surrounded by superior forces and then say, we're going to fight it out here? I think he was told to scuttle the war. That's what I think. And it's probably good he did, because God only knows what would have happened to this country had he not. Yeah. But, it's very interesting stuff. Again, when you look at the tentacles behind the scenes, it's always money. It's always money. It's always influence and supplies. So, I think it was Rockefeller, or I think it might have been Rothschild, said, you give me control of the money, I don't care who makes the laws. And very interesting how these wars always end up. Just like look at World War II. You had all the Nazis cart over here and, start the nuclear program here. That was all coming out of Germany. I mean, they all defected and went here. We got all their scientists.
Right. Yeah. All of this is orchestrated. Just
the money.
Yeah. And it's all planned out. I mean, I never used to think like that, or I never realized that before 9/11, actually. Then it all started to come together, for me, at least. Like, what's really going on here? What's really going on?
Oh, yeah. You lived through that. See, I only saw that on TV. You were there. What was that like? That'd be incredible. It
was really something else. Really stressful, really scary, I mean, obviously, I feel almost not equipped to talk about something like that when you compare that to people who are living in a war zone 24/7, right? What's that like? So, but it was obviously very unexpected, very scary for a long, long time. And I didn't live far from there either. So my whole apartment and rooftop were smoked out, and it was crazy. It was really crazy. But to watch that, and just so sad that anytime something like that goes on in the world, it's incredibly sad. And we've got to all pray constantly for a shift.
Well, I remember that. I was actually having a discussion with another astrologer friend of mine, Arch Crawford, and we were discussing this on the phone. I said, something big's about to happen. Had a Saturn-Pluto opposition lining up. And sure enough, I don't think it was but the next day.
Wow.
I look at the TV walking through the living room, and oh my God, there's a tower smoldering, and then the other one got hit, and then down sparklers they came,
Yeah.
From jet fuel, of course, right.
Right. That's for Rumble.
That's for Rumble. Yeah. Sorry. Gotta let me loose, man. I mean, this is too restrictive.
Gotta let him loose. Let him loose.
Yeah, I'm like a stallion in the cage. I gotta get out, but I can't say anything on this thing. We'll get canceled.
Yeah. Well, I think what we talk about is fine for YouTube, and I think, and I hope people are, excited about it and, interested in it. So,
Yeah.
well, what other current events did you want to hit on? I think there was something else.
Well, it was basically, kind of looking at, again, Dr. Fauci. I actually had his chart and we cast it in there. We didn't really have a birth time on him, but I looked quite a bit at Fauci's chart. And, it's interesting because he's going to be, well, let me just come back to this. Yeah.
82.
He's going to be 82. That's right. Yeah.
On
He's
Christmas
right now.
Eve.
81. Yeah, he's got a birthday right here in December 24th. And, it's interesting. Elon is coming after him saying, literally using pronouns, prosecute Fauci. And, Rand Paul and so many others have really looked at the gain of function research and all the other things. And there's no question, in my opinion, it's been going on. And, I looked at this whole, pandemic thing. And no matter what you want to go into in terms of its cause, I knew something big was coming and I knew it was going to be fascist. That's the nature of Saturn and Pluto. Mm-hmm. And boy, it was. Right. It really was. No matter how you slice and dice this pie, the astrology was right. Yeah. It was clearly has affected the world and will continue to affect the world. You look at how many people associated with this whole situation have died and are still dying. It's really sad. And again, I can't mention exactly what it is on a YouTube channel, but boy, oh boy, I could tell you I've got a lot of clients who are in the medical field and other fields of infectious diseases, etc. And it's really saddening. It's really saddening what that pandemic did. And it is highly probable, there was some very serious efforts to make that all, happen the way it did. Yeah. And the astrology, these people know this. These new one world orderers, they're very aware. They're not just, oh, this happened, let's jump on it. No. They got all their ducks in a row when it happens. Mm-hmm. And the only way you could know that is knowing the cycles, and they do.
Right. So they do it. What you're saying is they do it right on time, basically.
Well, it certainly seems to line up that way. I'll say that. I don't want to be called a conspiracy theorist, but I hate to say I told you so, but everyone said, Jeff, what do you think of the Mayan calendar? Not a single thing. I just couldn't come up with nothing for that one. Yeah. And boy, the 2020 thing, come on. This world, look at the amount of businesses that have been lost. Look at the devastation. Oh. Further, look at the fascism. Look at the police departments. Look at the cities. Look at the rioting. Look at the border. Look at the governments. Look at the energy crisis. Every angle has been pounded on ever since 2020. Yeah. So it's almost like they knew, and they were just pulling every lever down, opening the gates for chaos. It's like the gates of hell, literally. Yeah. It's almost like the gates of hell were opened for this to come through. And I hate to say it, but it's really been rough, and there's a lot of people I've talked to who are really financially damaged irreparably. They will be forever. And, some of these people have lost a lot of money. They lost their businesses. I think you know about that one too. Yeah. So it's been devastating,
It's been devastating for so many. Well, I wonder.
And the young people, look at the young people, how sad they are. This world is really been encroaching upon, all kinds of things for both men and women. It's been horrible. What's been happening to just gender identity and all this stuff that's just an attack on humanity. There's no other way to say it. It's been an attack on humanity. And when you really look at it, we mentioned this before, it's demonic. There's no other words for it. It's a demonic energy. Yeah. That's pervasive.
Yeah. It's definitely pervasive. It definitely is. Well, I know you're going to be talking about 2023, what we have to look forward to next week.
Yes.
So that'll be really interesting.
The winter solstice is coming, folks. And the winter solstice is so powerful. There's the 4 points in the year, and the winter solstice is when the sun in the northern hemisphere is at its lowest point, and it seems to stand still. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. Yeah. Well, do you want to jump to a question now? One of our questions? Yeah. Why not? Let's get it going. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we had talked about on a previous podcast, we spoke about the moon representing the mother in astrology and the sun representing the father. And someone is asking if you could go into that a little further, go into that a little deeper. Yeah, you bet. That'd be great. That's a great question, actually. Again, I really have always said I wish I'd have started with Nadi astrology and learned the other stuff after. And it's kind of went the other way around. I got into many of the ancient traditional types of astrology, which was Egyptian, Chaldean, Hellenistic, and Western stuff in the 70s in through the 80s, and then the 90s started encroaching. I really got into the Vedic astrology, exposed a little bit in the late 80s, but really got into it in the 90s. And then I really got into the Nadi. It's always intrigued me. And I think, again, if there was ever a way to say that there's a matrix here, the Nadi astrology proves it, in my opinion. It is the most unusual and different type of astrology I've ever seen. And the reason why is, again, we totally get away from, you're a Libra, you're an Aries, and all this sun sign crap. And you start looking at the whole solar system is signifactors of our lives. And that's fascinating stuff, because the sun is indicative of the father, the moon is indicative of the mother. And then when you have children or progeny, it's always the sun is the sun then. And people will say, well, how can you, use multiple signifactors like that? But you can't. And it wasn't until I really got shown and started understanding this stuff, and then years and years of study, and I'm still very humbled, and I'm always studying. And like today, I had a wonderful session with a gentleman in Italy. And the first thing I said, wow, your dad is a swashbuckler. I said, I'll bet he was one handsome dude and one tough dude. He says, oh my God, how did you know? And I said, well, because the sun is with exalted Venus. That's the sun, the father. See, you have to look at not just the sun, but you start pairing all of the aspects using the Nadi astrology to the signifactor you're interested in, whether it's a brother, whether it's a mother, whether it's, a brother from another mother, or if you're looking at the adoptions, all these types of things. It's really fascinating stuff. And I am stunned. What we could do, I could pull up your chart. You want to take your chart and look at it?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
We've looked at it many, many, many times, but it'd be exciting.
Yeah.
Other people to learn from.
It's kind of a great example. So let me go to screen share here and do that real quick. Great. So here we go. This is your chart, Ella. And this is for anyone watching, this is the Northern Indian chart. And there's also the other one that's more used quite a bit in Nadi astrology is the Southern Indian chart, which is this chart here. I kind of like that when I look at Nadi astrology, because it really pairs, more into how I look at things. So one of the interesting things about you was your father is the exalted sun. And it's the first thing I said to you was, I bet your dad wasn't around. And you said, oh my God, how did you know that? Well, right. Look at this. ASC is your ascendant, meaning the Eastern horizon. Now in Vedic astrology, the Eastern horizon is where spirit becomes manifest. Now think about that. That's so different than sun sign astrology. And think about that. The Eastern horizon, when all of us were born, we came out of mom's womb, they say the guardian angel ties the spirit, psyche, and soul to the body at first breath. So that's where spirit becomes manifest. See? So they actually say the spirit, psyche, and soul is not fully into the body. It's only assigned by silver cord during conception through the pregnancy. But right when we exit the womb, that's when spirit becomes manifest. So this is your ascendant. Now, the father is in your 12th house. You know what that means? He wasn't around.
Right.
And you confirmed that. He left at 3 years old, didn't he?
That's right. Yes, he did. And that was one of the first things you said to me. Father wasn't around.
Yep. But interesting, he was probably a really smart guy, got into a lot of things. And you had mentioned, I think he was in some executive position. We don't want to get into all your details, but he was definitely in a very powerful executive position, later became very prominent in many significant investments, and yet never, ever came back to you. It was very sad.
Wasn't around. Yep.
Just abandoned the whole family, which was really a problem. And
well, what's interesting too about this, and the questioner brought this up. So when we see the father or the mother
Right.
We can also see in our chart how what they did or are doing will affect our lives, will affect us.
Yes.
You can see that. And that's so interesting because, well, it's all right there in the astrology, actually. It's your blueprint.
Right.
The blueprint of your life, but it does show how their actions affect our lives.
How could they not? And I think that's a message to parents in general. I mean, it's so important for parents to take care of their children and their family, especially when these children are growing up. They really need that support. The core elements of the family are so strong. And I know you had mentioned your mother had kind of a rough time with him meeting his obligations and meaning child support and et cetera. But, all of that shows up. And see, your mother's the moon. Now look at the mother. Your mom was a sweet lady. And this is the moon. See, you have to look at the signs and the placements in what we call the Navamsha. Navamsha is a strange word. It comes from the word 9. Novena is a Latin Greek term that actually means 9, or Navamsha means 9. So what they do is they take all the planets and divide the signs, or they take all the signs and divide them into a 9th division. And it's very sacred because 9 equals spiritual completion on the physical plane. So you take the 9th position of each planet, and that shows up over here in what we call the D9 chart, the Navamsha. So your mother is the moon. She was very prominent in your life because this chart right here, which is also known as the indicator Navamsha or Karaka Amsha, is in your 10th house. And she was more by far your father than your father ever was.
Oh, yeah. Well, she was the mother and the father. She had to be. So,
and she worked hard. She was a nurse, really good lady. I mean, I like her a lot. And she had a tough life.
She did.
And
we could see that in my chart.
Yes, you could. That's exactly right. Without looking at her.
If we look at the chart that way, right?
That's right.
We can see that without looking at her chart.
That's exactly right. This is only your chart. I'm not looking at your mom.
Yeah, I know.
And I didn't have your mom's chart until years later. The reason why is your mother has Mars in the water trine on her. So that's not easy. Why? Because Mars aspects the moon in its sign of debilitation. Moreover, when you look at but she was blessed. Why? Because in the Karaka Amsha, she has Jupiter on her. So that means she had blessings. And this is really interesting because, we have to look at astrology in a different way here. And this is what always really struck me about the ancient worlds of astronomy and astrology. And that is, we tend to, as astrologers in the modern world, look at everything as signs, planets, and houses. But what I love about the Nadi astrology is really looking more at angelic blessings and curses upon the soul.
Right.
Think about that. That's pretty heavy duty stuff. So whenever you see Jupiter, which is God's glory, and Venus, which is the blessings and they're called the Jiva planets, which means the blessings planets, or you could say the opulence or the blessings upon the soul. You always look good. When you see Saturn, which is karma, and you see Mars, which is cutting and scissors, it's very aggressive. See, so this is why I love Nadi astrology, is because it's very cut and dried. It's like, okay, this soul had this, and this going on.
Right.
And you can see the opulence. You can see the challenges and the hardships on the mother and the father. See, your father actually had a really interesting life because he had a screwy life. And, I don't want to disclose things here on the air, but, there was some very questionable behavior with him as you were growing up as a very young child. And, you would discuss that with me. But it clearly shows that. Why? K2, the moon's south node aspect of the father in the fire trine. See, and that's what's really even more telling. Without getting into all those details of astrology, you begin to put pieces and puzzles together of likelihood of certain types of influences and behaviors that you just couldn't get in any other astrologer.
Right, right. No, you can't. And you can also see siblings in your chart, and you can also see your own children if you have any.
That's right.
Your chart.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very mysterious. And I have to admit and humbly admit, sometimes I got to really scratch my head because these are very complex. Again, Vedic astrology and Nadi astrology does not use Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. Now, I certainly do in readings. I use all of that, especially in location astrology. And when I look at the other half of the world, which is the tropical astrology, I certainly do. But I notice when you're talking about an individual's soul path in this incarnation, you don't need them. See, Saturn seems to represent our perception of time. And the ancient rabbis said the same thing, that time or the illusion of time starts in from Saturn. So Shakespeare was right. It's all a big play and we're the actors. And the scripts are the karmas of our lives. It's like a big soap opera going on here.
Yeah, it sure feels
It
like
really
it.
is.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad we got to look at that.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. It really is.
Yeah.
So, I
Really
love
is.
it. So, yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
So another question, you want to tackle another question?
Sure. I mean, why not? We got a little bit of time yet, don't we?
We do.
All right, good.
Well, this person is asking, is there any indication as to whether there could be a relaxation of restrictions and a greater freedom of movement in 2023? Now, I know you'll address this when you do your when we do our show on 2023, but can you address it a little bit today?
Yeah, I can say this. I think the major plays that they've made happened in 2020. I think we're at the effect of that. I think one of the things I'm very concerned about with this Neptune square Mars is we're going to see, again, a clash of the titans here between, I think, the globalists and the nationalists. I think this is what's really going on. Another thing that's on the radar screen is very prominent is China is coming in to Saudi Arabia and the oil-rich countries of the Middle East. What are they doing? They're trying to get the yuan to replace the petrodollar. At the same time that Biden and his handlers are unplugging all of the petrochemical industry and turning windmills on. Yet China is ramping up into more and more usage of oil and expanding a larger carbon footprint than any country on the planet. So it's very fascinating how we're trying to weaken America, or the globalists are trying to weaken America, because I really think they want a new one world global order. Mm-hmm. The question is, will they get it? I would say my take is at this juncture from the astrology, probably not. Don't count out America yet, though it's looking dire. All right now, they've got 23 knives stuck in her back and, they got a noose around her neck trying to pull her to the ground. But America's pretty tough. And I really hope and pray that I'm correct that, this Jupiter progression that's kicking in this January, coupled with all the things that I'm seeing, the Pluto return and the Neptune and the Saudi Sate, we may see a backlash that is much stronger and more forceful than is totally to our awareness right now. You really can't trust the media, particularly. I mean, the media is insane, and they're clearly pushing back in every way. So yeah. I would tend to say my answer to that question, and we'll get into this much, much deeper in this next podcast on the winter solstice with the projection of 2023, that I really believe right now I place my chips on America will come back. I think it's going to be a really dicey road because these people at the top of the pyramid are evil. They've got power and control. They've given it. They've been giving it to them ever since Wilson signed it over. And we'll see where this goes.
I hope that for America, and I hope it for all the other countries too, because there are problems everywhere.
And we mentioned this before.
So many restrictions, and we hope to see a lift.
Well, again, this is really, it's out now communism.
Yeah.
Again, I was struck when I went to the Reagan Library and I saw that on the wall. It just really struck me where I think it was Lenin in Russia that had said, we don't care if we kill 3/4 of the human race as long as the quarter that's left is communistic. And I thought, wow. Wow. And you look back at the poor souls on this planet that have been murdered, tortured, starved to death. I mean, the same thing went on in England with the potato famine and famine in Ireland. You look at what all these dictators and all these horrible, just watch the movie Braveheart. It's a perfect example.
Yep.
This despotic underlying evil dominance has been prevalent throughout the human race. And these pendulums swing back and forth. Well, clearly, we saw 2020 bring in fascism. There's no question about it. And now we're going to see with all these aspects, it swing back. And I think we're going to see a backlash here that's very prominent. I don't want to mention too much about anything with the 2024 campaign yet, but that's going to be a real showstopper, I think.
I bet it will be. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And we hope you're enjoying your holiday season. Thanks for listening, watching. Thanks for sharing. And we'll see you next time. We'll see you real soon.
You bet. Thank you.